Welcome to Silicon Valley Asian Business Talk.
My name is Roger Chen, and I work at the University of San Francisco. My field basically is the innovation and a strategy, and I represent basically two centers. So one is, as you can see here, from the, we call it CAPS, University of San Francisco Center for Asia Pacific Studies, and also another center is the Center for Business Studies and Innovation in Asia Pacific. It's also part of an interview program I'm doing for the center. The name of the interview program is called the Silicon Valley Asia Business Talk, where we kind of interview successful Asian business leaders as well as entrepreneurs. So yeah, Stacey, yeah, please.
So I don't
briefly
know.
Introduce yourself.
So to begin with, I don't know how I fit in that description you just said, Silicon Valley entrepreneur.
You are part of Silicon Valley, right?
A little bit further out. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. So my name is Stacey Ma. I'm currently the Executive Vice President of Pharmaceutical Development and Manufacturing at Gilead Sciences, which is a biopharmaceutical company. My entire career has been in the biopharmaceutical company for close to almost 30 years. I spent over 2 decades in another very famous biopharmaceutical biotech company in the Bay Area, Genentech, and then Roche. And then after 20-some years there, I also joined a startup in the Bay Area, Sound Biotechnology, which is a cell gene therapy company, and built up a whole tech ops or manufacturing organization there from ground up. After 3.5 years as Sound Biotechnology, I joined Gilead in mid-2022, so at the tail end of the COVID pandemic era, and I have been there almost 3 years. So it's really a pleasure to be here to talk a little bit about kind of the intersection of technology and biotechnology.
Gilead, history, achievements, and aspiration.
Give us like a brief introduction about the company, Gilead. In terms of positioning, what is Gilead's and what's your aspiration in the industry? So let's start with that kind of general question.
Yeah, sure. I've been learning about Gilead for the last 3 years. So Gilead actually was founded about 38 years ago in Foster City. So it's very much a homegrown Bay Area entrepreneur company, very successful. So it was founded back in '87 and started as an oligonucleotide company. That was the age of antisense technology in late '80s. It started as Oligogene, as the company name, literally. And then quickly pivoted to an antiviral-based, focused in terms therapeutic area company. So Gilead has actually been around for 38 years. It's extremely successful in its in that virology space. It has actually developed drugs called Sovaldi that is a cure for hepatitis C. It has actually delivered numerous revolutionary treatment, I would say, for HIV, both treatment and prevention. One of the big one is Biktarvy, that is for HIV treatment, an oral daily kind of pill type of regimen, as well as for hepatitis B. And then, of course, during the COVID pandemic area is a big drug for people who are hospitalized is Veklury, remdesivir. It's still to date, it's the only drug that's actually approved for treatment for COVID.
Oh.
So it actually has a very long history. It's extremely successful in delivering or developing these antiviral products. And I would say the company since 2019, under the current CEO, Dan O'Day's leadership, the company has really been working on diversification. So the company, in addition to virology, we have been actually expanding to oncology and also inflammation or immunology therapeutic areas. So with that, with Trodelvy is it's one of the first antibody drug conjugate for triple negative breast cancer. and also with Kite, which is a autologous CAR T therapy company, is actually the very first approved for lymphoma, a type of blood cancer. So it's actually very diverse in the therapeutic area. In terms of Gilead, Gilead has always been with the mission to create a healthier world for all. And I think it has done really an amazing job throughout its 30 plus years of history, have done that globally, not just for US. It's truly is delivering those treatments to patients everywhere. And it will continue to that. Our ambition is to, over a decade, since from 2020 to 2030, is to deliver 10 plus transformative therapy to patient, and we're actually well on its way across all three therapeutic areas, of course. And in addition to be able to deliver that kind of medicine, and we'll get into a little bit, for pharmaceutical company, it's a very long life cycle from initial discovery to getting a product approved, and it's also an extremely high risk industry because the success rate is very low. So to be able to get to the 10 plus transformative therapy treatment, you actually need a very large pipeline. And we have been actually successfully doubling our pipeline since the beginning of 2019 till now. So it's lots of ambition to create that healthier world for all. So that's maybe a very brief introduction about Gilead as a company.
The impact of AI on the pharmaceutical industry.
We can talk about the AI, which is kind of a big elephant, the topics many people are interested. Maybe you can tell us actually from your perspective how AI is changing or influencing the way, let's say, pharmaceutical companies, including Gilead, to do the drug discoveries. Because there are a lot of talks, report about that. Maybe you can share some insights relating to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was asking, earlier, who's from pharmaceutical, who's from technology.
Yeah.
So I'm obviously from the pharmaceutical space. So I look at AI as a tool, right? How do I use it to aid? My end goal is to deliver a drug to patient.
Right.
So let's just start with that. So then in that context, so AI, first of all, AI definitely has already been playing a role in the pharmaceutical industry from beginning to the end, meaning from drug discovery to delivering the supply to patient. And it will continue to evolve and play a role. So it is here to stay. Having said that, I think there's definitely, the whole industry in the biopharmaceutical industry, the view of AI to a large extent. We had the initial hype. I think we're coming down, cooling a little bit to come to a more of a reality check in terms of what do we use this technology for? It comes down to that. And it does have a lot of different application in different, area of pharmaceutical industry. So let's say in the research discovery stage, there's a lot of application of using AI, looking at protein structure, like how the protein interact with the cells and et cetera. So in the discovery stage, and in the clinical development stage, which is a huge portion of how you develop a drug, you test the product in patient, in human. So there's a lot of application looking at real world evidence. How do you leverage that learning, as well as in just clinical trial? How do you design the trial? How do you execute the trial? Select the site of clinical studies. Those are our technology that you use. And then more closer to home in my space, which is really focusing on how do you make the product, which requires technology, requires development, and it requires execution and operation every day to make it. And the application really, in a sense, you can split it into two buckets, so to speak. One is how do you use AI in the development phase, stage, which is how do you actually improve the speed, use more modeling versus doing the work in the lab, et cetera. Those are the application of AI. And if you can streamline doing the development, a lot of our work effort end up in a regulatory submission because we're in a very highly regulated environment. everything needs to go through, submit to FDA here, but the rest of the world has equivalent health authorities. So how do you streamline that process from beginning to the end? So if you can automate the report writing into the submission document, et cetera, those are all area of, I would say, efficiency that you can also look at. So that's one area, is how do you develop a product and getting it approved by health authorities. In the other area is operation every day in a manufacturing plant. So how do you consider the operation? And there's a lot of, in our space, a lot of quality oversight, because it goes to patients. So there's a lot of compliance aspect that you have to factor in. And then a big piece is supply chain. Is how do you actually consider these three components of operation every day, have the data that are connected so that you can actually access the data from everywhere around the globe. I run a global operations, right? So those are the technology that you actually are basically we're leveraging in terms of AI. So there are different type of technology and application. So that's kind of maybe a high level and different area that you can think of AI application in.
Yeah, I think that's great, because actually if you look at the media, there are a lot of discussion about the very promising drug discoveries that you rely on AI. So what's your view on that? Because they're talking about, AI, using AI kind of algorithm models, you can discover, almost like discover the drugs to cure all sorts kind of a disease. Do you agree or disagree in those kind of things? Yeah,
I think it's possible. It's going to take time. And
so when you say take time, roughly how long is the time horizon, actually?
I would say decades.
A decade, well.
Decades, I said plural.
Oh, plural.
It depends on the product. This is my personal view.
Yeah, of course.
It depends on the product, the complexity of the product. It's one thing if you're developing a small molecule because the structure is very simple. It's another thing you try to develop a cell as your product. That's a very complex, and it's a living system as a product. So the technology, the basic data that's needed to actually make those decisions is orders of magnitude different. So that's why this will continue to evolve, and a lot of this is depends on what is it actually for. Okay. It's not a one size fits all. Maybe that's one way of looking at it. Yeah,
because actually, if you look at a lot of medias, they basically portray a very, very exciting kind of promising picture, but then, from you, it's a reality check. You say, plural, decades. So that gives us like a rough sense how long you will have to wait.
In a way, you can also look at least, we talked a lot about AI, et cetera, and recently I was in one conversation. It was actually a very good point that was raised. How do we compare AI with internet? In terms its scale, in terms everybody's using it, it's everywhere. The impact, and that's actually a really good way of looking at it. How long has it taken internet for it's so widely used? It's not short years; it's decades.
Yeah, that's true. And also, as you said, depends upon the field, right?
Correct.
So maybe kind of a say few things, because you say in the operation side of it, a lot of efficiency benefits. Mm-hmm. How about that? Do you think that we may see benefits, faster or?
It would be faster in some ways. Again, it comes down to data, and there's just so much data in our field. It has to be structured data. It needs to be connected, and it needs to be regulated. And all of these has to come together. You're going to find application in a certain area. Before it to have an impact end to end, to truly have a business, sort of make a difference, impact, everything has to work, has to be adjusted, and that would take time.
That's a very good point, because you mentioned about major pillars, like a connected, structured data, regulatory kind of issues. Mm-hmm. Based upon your view, which one probably is the biggest barriers to make this kind of happen end to end, in a sense?
I don't know if it's one is going to be particular the barrier. I think all of them will continue to evolve. I'll say a few words on the regulation part, right? it will continue to evolve, and there's a lot more regulation. And when I say regulation, I don't mean kind of the AI, the data side, the privacy, the ethics, etc. That's given. I'm also talking about how do you actually then have drug developed in a way that is going to be able to get approval given the current drug sort of regulation by health authorities. And typically this also needs to be done, we'll come back to that. When you develop a drug, you also develop globally. You don't develop just for US.
That's true, yeah.
So you need to make sure that the global regulation of these new approaches are also sort of moving forward in the same pace. And that in itself is going to be taking time because not all the countries will have the same adoption of these new sort of rules. So those are all going to evolve over time.
Right. So we can see the complexity of that, because it's kind of multidimensional in a sense, right?
Gilead's strategy for embracing AI and innovation.
Actually, what is the Gilead's approach embracing or thinking about adopting AI?
Yeah, I would just start off. Gilead, as an innovator, always wants to stay current. So very open to innovation. I think so. The foundation of the culture is always open, stay curious, adopt new technology, right? So that's one in terms how we manage new technology. In general, AI just one.
Yeah, right.
The second is in terms of innovation, manage AI as innovation. A lot of what we do innovation, I would say it's kind of, what do you call it, integrated innovation. It's really putting different things together. So it's extremely interdisciplinary in terms of development of a new drug. And then incorporating a new technology and how you develop a drug also has to be cross-functional. So it's always about how do you, create that cross-functional working environment. And at the same time, you do want to make sure from a decision-making perspective. So it's a lot about cultural element. You have to create that culture, foster innovation, but create that kind of structure to enable that. So that's one, how Gilead managed sort of AI as part of our capability to enable drug development. The other piece is also you need to stay focused on kind of the application. What is it that you're trying to do? So it's not that AI for everything. And then when we also say AI, it doesn't mean it's always generative AI or engine. Sometimes it's just machine learning. So it's really what is that activity you're trying to apply this new technology for? That's really key. So with that, each area will have to figure out what makes the most sense. But then they need to be connected because otherwise, whatever is the bottleneck is going to slow down everything. So you have to make sure that you create that end-to-end sort of workflow change. And the third piece is, like everything, applying a new technology, doing things differently is a change. So you have to factor in the human element. How do you manage that change? And automation, digitization, it's sort of thing of the past. We've kind of gone through that, but all of that required change management in terms of people, how the people doing the work means they have to learn new skills, and sometimes they may not be able to do the exact same way because you have to change. So that's a huge change management element of how we manage these technology change as well.
Yeah, actually, you already kind of answered some kind of questions I would like to ask later, but since you touched on this, maybe I can ask a follow-up question, because as a professor of strategy innovation, this is very close to what I teach to my students. As you mentioned about the integration, the total solution, and also coordination, this is very, very common challenges many companies face, not only by AI innovation, all sorts kind of change, new initiatives. But how do you deal with those kind of issues, under your management, under your leadership, in a sense?
Yeah, that's probably the hardest part of our job. It's a little bit kind of how do you lead as a technology leader, and versus how do you lead as people organizational leader. In our both space, technology or biotech, you kind of have to do both. You have to lead. You have to be a technical leader to understand the technology or the technical piece. At the same time, you have to lead people, which is the most complex.
Maybe even more challenging.
A lot of time it's much harder because, in the technical side, at the end of the day, you might find a simple answer, or at least in science, you always find a single truth. When people, there's not one single truth. We're all different. We all want different things. We all have different ways of doing things. We have different preferences. So that's the complexity. And so how do you actually lead change is in itself is a lot of scientific research articles. It's in itself, it's a research area, right? It has been for a long time.
That is true, yeah.
And this still remains. And I think one thing we do have to be very thoughtful about is all the technology from my industry, right? If I look at pharmaceutical industry, applying technology, whether it's digitization, automation, all of this is actually aiding people. You're making your job easier. AI, there is an additional fear because now you're talking about the machine will be replacing you. So if you were a person who need to actually adopt this new technology, that is a huge challenge, that you are now trying to adopt something that's going to replace you. So just think about that. That's the challenge.
But that's kind of interesting you mentioned this, because in the software space, a lot of people say software developers face huge challenge, kind of replaced by AI. But do you see the similar thing happen in the pharmaceutical industry where AI may replace a lot of human?
I personally don't see that happening anytime soon, given the state where we are in terms of the data, the capability, and it comes down to the humans still need to either kind of verify, we don't have enough data and enough sort of training, and then the judgment of an individual is still key at this point.
So in other words, actually, people work in your industry, they still got a safe job, in a sense, compared with the software developers, things like that.
Well, yes, that's my belief. But they have to change the way how they do the work, which in itself is a huge change. Let's not forget that. They may have a job, but their job may look very different. Yeah,
that's like, I think Jensen Huang says it's the people who knows AI replacing people who don't know how to use AI.
And that's the other thing. I mean, I think we've been talking a lot about replacing. My view is we need to maybe think a little bit differently. Is it really replacing, or is it like aiding you to make your job either better or faster or more efficient? If you think of it in that context, it's not a competition.
Yeah.
And it's really how do you apply this?
Right.
Gilead, working with external innovation communities.
What is the approach Gilead kind of try to work with the external startups, innovation, kind of founders? Maybe you can share with us about that. So I think that might be very relevant information for a lot of startup founders.
Sure, and also my own personal experience. I worked in a startup too. So I would say biopharmaceutical industry in general is very, I would say, open to open innovation. So meaning both internal innovation and external innovation. That's why we have this huge ecosystem with all the startup, right? So, and Gilead is no different. Gilead has historically track record has always been very open to external innovation. You need to have internal expertise to even evaluate external innovation. So it's not that one. It's not one versus the other. It's actually how do you, frankly, take smart risk in evaluating external options. So Gilead, if you look at the cure for hepatitis C, which is Sovaldi, is actually a Gilead acquisition of a company called Pharma back in 2011 or so. So Gilead historically has always been very open to innovation and continue to do so. Yes, Kite is an acquisition. Our biggest breast cancer drug, Trodelvy, is through an acquisition. So Gilead has a very proven track record of innovation, acquire innovations through external options. So we'll continue to do so. The second is actually when we think about external innovation, it has to be very, very, focused, aligned to our, expertise, our leadership in sort of the therapeutic disease area. So
okay, your strategic priorities.
Yeah, so it's a very clear alignment in our strategic sort of disease area. So that's another one. And our model has been actually very flexible. If you look at Gilead, we have partnership, we have certainly acquisitions, another one. We have joint venture as well. So it's a pretty wide range of how we approach external innovation.
Do you have any kind of a specific programs or a kind of a joint kind of activities to embrace where startup companies can just look for and explore the possible cooperation opportunities?
Yeah, so it's also various different approach. JP Morgan is a big event every year that's here in the city. That's for, by pharmaceutical company is one of the biggest. So there's a lot of meetings during that week. Oh. That's one. So that's up in the city, usually second week of January. So for our space, this is the big sort of business event. But otherwise, there's our website. People can send in the information through people you know. You can send in, usually kind of what your company is about, what is your, technology or product. So there's multiple approaches.
Channels, right?
Yeah, channels. And we internally we have an organization that's literally focused on these business development that they coordinate. So this has always been a focus of what we do.
That's great. Thank you.
Pharmaceutical industry in new global trade environment.
But I have another question, actually another major topic that we are focusing on these days about a tariff. Huge changes, uncertainties, and a very volatile kind of environment. Yep. So, although we do not know the final shape of this kind of new trade regimes or environment, but we see some general directions. So, from your perspective, what's your view about this new trade environment? That direction is going to shape the landscape of the global pharmaceutical industries and also how it's going to impact global companies like yours in doing business in the global markets. When I say doing business, means starting from drug development to the manufacturing to the sales, things like that. So I think that's a lot of people interested in that. Yeah,
it's the topic that changes every day.
Right.
So I'll start off with it's very dynamic. It continues to evolve. So I don't have the crystal ball where it's going to land. But I think I'll put it at the high level. There's one aspect of the tariff, the trade sort of direction that it's leaning towards is. In our industry, how do you make the product and how do you distribute the product? It's called supply chain. It's no different than technology. Every time you make a product, there's supply chain involved. So in our industry, the supply chain historically is because you're dealing with disease, human. It's about global supply chain for global market. Where we are heading towards is local supply chain for local market. So that is a big change for our industry. We're not in the food industry that you might have local flavor you need. So you create a Pepsi or Coca-Cola, whatever, that's for a local market. That's not where pharmaceutical industry is, right? If you have cancer patient here versus cancer patient in a different, somewhere else around the globe, they're getting the same product. So that's what global for global means. And now we're talking about, and the supply chain is very complex for pharmaceutical products. But what we are talking about is now, think local supply chain for local market. So it will have a huge impact. You see news every day about, what does that mean? Localize the manufacturing. Our industry is also heavily capitalized in making it, so it's a lot of investment. It's expensive, and it also takes time because it's highly regulated. Every time you make a change, every time you move the supply chain, it requires FDA approval. So that's what we're facing.
But that's interesting. Actually, there are two questions relating to that. When you say requires a lot of regulatory approval by different countries, that means it will slow down, it will take a lot of time to make those kind of change. The second is about the efficiency, the cost, which is, do you think that's also impact the cost? Because that's
It certainly will impact the cost every time when you make product that's specialized to a certain area, right? Versus you making the same product for everybody, so you can make bigger batches. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not really comparing, but kind of Costco, there is reason why it's more efficient, and then a smaller, store.
But I think that's a very interesting point. That's a huge impact, right? Because medicine has some kind of a social kind of implication for a lot of people, especially kind of a low-income people. So that's a kind of maybe complexity or uncertainty people need to figure out, I guess.
Yes.
Right?
There's definitely a lot of consideration that we need to manage.
Right.
And I'll just add on to, in addition to kind of the supply chain, the time and the investment it's needed, and then ultimately, higher cost. The other piece I think let's not forget is a lot of the changes, or at least what has been announced so far, to the federal funding, to NIH, to HHS. That also has a long-lasting impact. Because fundamentally, the basic research in biomedical space, a lot of it is through these academic, right? And then these national institution basic research. Our industry is doing applied research. Frankly, our investment VC ecosystem in the U.S. is also now focused on basic research.
Yeah.
So that is the pipeline to innovation in our space, and we'll still have to figure out how this unfolds. But if you cut basic research, there's an element of efficiency, no doubt. But if you drastically cutting these basic research funding, that dries out your pipeline of innovation. Granted, that's like way at the beginning of any kind of innovation pipeline, so the impact is going to be longer term. But that's a huge impact as well.
Yeah,
Let's not forget.
That's a very good point.
Exciting trends/opportunities in pharmaceutical industry.
We're talking about a lot of changes or challenges. Any kind of bright spots, like exciting things you want people to be aware, beside these challenges and uncertainties, brought up by all sorts of reasons, could be technologies, whatever, in your pharmaceutical industry, make people be more positive in a sense.
About AI or about
No,
tariff?
actually, overall industry, actually the exciting things. So maybe motivating young people to kind of just develop a career in your space.
Okay, I was wondering if you're asking me a question about an exciting opportunity with the tariff.
No.
I was
Just
a little bit.
Right? Overall.
Overall, absolutely. I've been in, I started in this industry right after my PhD, so it's my first and only sort of industry. I mean, the mission is extremely inspirational if you think about it, this industry, right? You're touching people's life. You're making an impact on people's life. That's what you do at the end of the day. It's saving people's life, improving the quality of their life. And not that many, that's not many industry that actually has that impact. So that's one. Second, it's an industry that is, it's rooted in innovation. When you actually have a new product improved, it has to have a differentiated property, whether it's improving the efficacy or the safety of the product that impacts that patient. So it's a highly innovative industry. It is actually also an industry that extremely risk-taking, if you think about it, on one hand. The industry, in comparison to the technology industry, has a much longer cycle time. This is one of the big difference between the two. The cycle time in the technology industry is maybe a couple of years, maybe shorter even, with software, in months maybe measured. By pharmaceutical industry, the cycle time going from the initial discovery to even enter into the initial human trial is usually a decade. And starting from the beginning of phase 1, it's usually called a clinical trial, to getting approved, it's another 5 to 10 years. So it's extremely long. So you really are in it for the long haul. So your resilience is character building. Yeah, so the resilience of this industry is really amazing. And then on top of that, the success rate is really low, actually. Only for a product starting at the initial human trial to getting a commercially approved, less than 1 out of 10 will make it. So it's a highly risky industry, but that's where it also creates a lot of opportunity if you can figure out ways doing things better, faster, and sort of increase that probability of success. So there's a lot of opportunity that's still ahead of us. So it's a great place to be.
Career growth tips in the pharmaceutical industry.
Actually, you kind of started your career as a technology leaders persons, then gradually transitioned to people leader. So maybe you can reflect about this transition from leading technology to leading people, which is more challenging, more difficult. What's the reflection, what's the lesson, to inspire young people who want to follow that career path?
Yeah, so I think for most of people in our sort of pharmaceutical industry, you start in as a technical in some area, right? So as a technical leader, you need to hone kind of that skill. And then you shift and you grow. I think the main thing I would say, looking back at my own career, is always stay curious, be a lifelong learner. Sometimes, it's through learning that you will continue to adapt yourself. At the same time, I think take some risks. Some of my most rewarding career growth is actually when I took a big risk, stretching myself. Don't be comfortable. Went from one area to another area that I didn't think I knew anything about, which is never the case. You always build on what you actually learn. But it's take that kind of big step to do something different that stretch you, because you learn how to lead in different ways. And I think a big transition in a way from a technical leader to leading people. A technical leader, you lead because you know it all. That's maybe one way of putting it. But as you continue to grow your career, move to bigger and bigger role, it's just impossible that you're the expert in everything. So you have to learn the skill how to lead through others, and you have to learn how to lead from, the know-it-all to really you have to learn it all. I think that's probably some of my key advice. So it's being a technical leader and being a people leader. It's not one or the other, it's both.
Thank you. Actually, maybe you answered all my question because you already give people some advice. If you do actually additional advice to young people just to start or in the early stage of their career, I assume in your case like they are still doing a lot of technical things. Any kind of advice to these early stage, professionals in a sense?
I think it's more or less maybe the same, and maybe I would just say give the advice is, be the lifelong learner, stay curious, always learn, adapt. Second is actually maybe you will have the opportunity to realize this sooner, or maybe will practice sooner to make sure you learn how to lead people. There's a different set of skills in terms of, empathy and in terms of communication to really be able to relate to people. So it's a different set of skill set. That's key. The last one, I would just say, maybe also be resilient. In the innovative space, failure comes with the territory. So don't be afraid. So take risk, and don't be afraid of failure. The key question is really, how do you fail fast and fail forward, right?
That's interesting. Yeah.
And that's extremely important for our drug development space, is how do you actually fail fast and fail forward. It's the learning that really grow people, I guess is my point I'm trying to make. It's the learning that will help you to grow. So it goes back a little bit to the learning piece.
Thank you very much.
Audience dialogue, AI and other topics in pharma.
Actually, now we kind of open up for the question and answers. Actually, we have a mic that can circle around. Any questions there? Yeah, then you can decide, how to kind of allocate the mics.
Thanks, everybody.
Maybe kind of stand up, very briefly introduce yourself. Yeah, then you ask questions. Thank you.
Thanks. So we're early stage started working on a robotic system for cell therapy manufacturing process. And part-time teaching is in the for translational medicine.
Sorry.
Part of it.
Yeah, it was. I couldn't hear very well. Yeah, there was maybe the position of the mic.
All right. Better.
Yeah.
Rebecca,
There's a lot of echo for me. Maybe a little bit lower. Actually, it's maybe a little bit lower.
Maybe better this way.
Okay, sorry.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Rebecca Lin.
Hi.
I work on an early stage startup where we focus on build a robotic system for cell therapy manufacturing process automation. Also part-time teaching I use at Berkeley for translational medicine, and AI innovation is part of the focus.
Okay.
So really appreciate your insight and perspective. So I've got two questions, if you don't mind, but you can pick one. The first one is, you mentioned that Gilead had this great vision to deliver 10 very innovative therapeutics in 10 years. So I'm curious, is the strategy behind where you will focus more? You have the cell therapy background or antibodies. There are so many things that we can focus on, but as a company, where actually you allocate a resource. And of course, I'm personally interested for cell therapy, but overall, just curious as a main platform.
Yeah, so I will start just say Gilead's ambition is really focused on the disease area, so the therapeutic area of oncology, virology, and inflammation or immunology, basically. It's less about the modality, which is very close to my heart, because what matters for manufacturing is about modality, and that's where but what our ambition is really about the disease, the patient's life we touch. And in the context of modality, which means whether the product is a small molecule, which tend to be a tablet you take, or a traditional biologics, like the Genentech products and monoclonal antibody, those tend to be more injectables, or the more complex gene therapy or cell therapy that you were mentioning, CAR T, or even stem cell-derived cell therapy. Those are all even more complex, advanced product. The modality itself is not something that we say we need to do this versus that. That has to come with the disease, is how do you treat that disease? And then the modality is basically in the toolbox. We want to have all modality and be available, that we have the capability to have all the modality. And it comes down to the disease, simply put. If your disease is a cell that is essentially cannot be repaired, needs to be replaced, then you need a cell. Right, and if it's a disease that you can inhibit through the pathway through a small molecule, you always go for the simple one, of course, but sometimes the simple one doesn't work. You need to have more complex modality, which is the product, to treat the disease. Then you have to go there. So
That's very helpful. Thanks.
Yeah.
My second question, hopefully that more people are actually interested, that Gilead as a company or you as an executive, I'm curious, you say AI is down the road, right, the adoption, but just curious, is there anything you already adopt or from your workflow from development to manufacturing, is there any percentage of your process actually already adopt AI? Is that internal developed or external developed?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. I didn't say that AI is down the road. I said it's here and will continue to be here. But in terms like AI is taking over everything, is not happening anytime soon. There are a lot of use case an application that we're using. And part of the challenge is for you to completely see the value is you have to have the whole workflow worked out. That's the point.
So before you have 100% cover, you don't feel that's a huge value add.
It is value add. You just cannot really feel the value until you have everything. I'm going to use an example, as I said earlier. If you think about my space, in the development space, we develop models, so we no longer have to do weeks worth of experiment. You can use a model to predict in certain space that we have enough data to be able to do that. But that's not going to change how quickly I'm going to develop that product. That's my point. So you would not feel it until everything is actually, so that's the point.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
And just follow up a question. So earlier you mentioned about for pharmaceutical company, the AI. Right now you guys are pretty emphasize using AI. I guess from an AI application point of view, it's easier for drug discovery to define a goal and to work with some particularly, I think in the Gilead case, you guys partner with Insatial, right? That a AI company founded by a famous Stanford AI professor and a machine learning expert. So their company, has a milestone that has like $1 billion. Gilead supposed to license whatever the targets, develop out of that, program. So that's kind of a outsourcing, basically partner with a third party, a vendor, to achieve, some AI, driven, the goal. That's easier, I think, is to define for management people, right? Because they have, whatever the problem they try to solve, and that whatever the last challenging that Gilead has for the late trial failure, then they partner with the company to do some predictive modeling, to improve the success rate. So on the other side, for the operation efficiency part,
maybe.
I'm getting that. Hold on. So for operation efficiency, how does management look into using AI to really solve internally?
So I would just say, first of all, AI, in terms of the technology, whether it's discovery or development or manufacturing, we actually do leverage external innovation. A lot of the model, we don't develop the model. Yeah. So we across the board leverage whatever technology that we can have access for the intended purpose. So the intended purpose is where it's different. What you actually have highlighted is a lot of the application in drug discovery, because you probably hear about it, because the collaboration, et cetera. A lot of the application in development or in manufacturing on the operational side, maybe we're applying some of these capability. You just haven't necessarily, we don't necessarily, communicate broadly. So you may not have, heard about that. That doesn't mean they don't exist. There are a lot of applications that we're looking at, especially from a use case perspective, which is different than actually fully, this goes back to my earlier point. There are a lot of use case that we're developing and trying it. But again, to completely have this embedded in our everyday sort of operation for it to fully utilize its potential, let's just say, it will still have time to go, still ways to go.
What I'm trying to ask is basically insight for a big company, like public company like Gilead, from management point of view, from top down, how they, approach this, say whether, they form an initiative to basically address specific issue, or AI is just a tool, right? And how you use them, how you form a team or resource to work around that problem. I mean, it's pretty much top managing people's vision, probably.
Yeah, so the vision.
More.
Yeah, so the vision is we want
to. You say programmer, I would let you work with the tool. You can only finish that whatever yourself a week. I can get that done in 2 hours. They may not read.
Yes, sorry, actually, we have to, sorry,
so
yes.
I will just quickly answer. The approach for our industry in terms of leveraging these technology, it requires both top-down and bottom-up, because the people knows the application are people doing the work. So I'm not going to be telling my team, hey, you need to use this particular AI tool for this particular problem, because they're much better at knowing what is the problem they're facing. So you actually want to apply the tool for actually a real problem. Otherwise, you're not adding value and making a business impact. But the top management has to be absolutely behind that. We want to build these capabilities. We want to move the organization, the ways how we do work this way. Meaning leverage AI as a capability, as a tool. So it's top and bottom, top down and bottom up.
Thank you. Yeah. So next question.
Hello. Yeah, very nice to hear your sharings, Dr. Ma. And my name is Jean. So I work as a pharmaceutical development team in Palace Pharmaceutical in the San Francisco site, and pretty much in the same area as you. And I have a specific question from my daily job, actually. So we have the filing for like Module 3, and we sometimes get a response from the FDA for XYZ kind of request. And sometimes the questions can be confusing. There are questions where sometimes they ask the data we already provide, and we just want more clarifications. But it's difficult to reach out to any regulatory agent by ourselves. So is any of the AI tool that's existing right now that I'm not aware of, or maybe developing in the future, that can just help like individual scientists to figure out what FDA is trying to get us, and how should I provide a response?
I don't know for sure, but one of the things was AI is a tool. The question is data to give you the insight. And the data, you're not going to have access to other sponsor companies' data to help you to get to the answer. You only have access to your own company's data unless people publish. Public data domain is sure. So it depends on the one that you want to get the answer for. If there are public data available, then AI tools can give you the answer potentially. But often the issue is data access.
Yeah, it can be like specific to each of the projects, each of the molecule.
Regulatory submissions are proprietary, confidential.
I guess we might hoping in the future there's some kind of tool that can keep the confidentiality and also can provide some explanations and helping our work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let's move on. Maybe the next entrepreneur can take on this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
I'm Shaolupi, and I'm from the Chinese consulate. Thank you very much for your talk. And so my question is, how do you think of FDA's recent policy trend of winding down animal testing in terms of feasibility, and how long it's in the way of replacing organized and AI-driven patient event prediction will replace animal testing?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is not my area of expertise, so I really can't comment.
Hello, thank you for your insightful sharing, Dr. Ma and Dr. Chen. My name is Eddie. I'm a startup founder of making sustainable materials to replace plastics. So I would like to change the subject a little bit from pharmaceutical to sustainability. I just tried to look up the websites and also the page of sustainability. I'm just wondering whether Gilead will, whether the company is making any medical devices, disposable medical devices, or whether you will have the plan to make disposable medical devices to bring your medicine. I know the company makes medicine, right? But whether to change to bring the testing to house, to home, or make it more convenient, make it portable.
Well,
Maybe I will.
this is in terms those when you talk about medical devices, especially for injectables, etc. Those are very much linked to the product and also how we use it. So, bring home, that means that the product needs to be a home use product, and we don't really have that kind of product to date. What in terms of injectable home use? Most of the Gilead products are injectables. If they're injectables, they're for oncology patients. They tend to be, infusion-related. Cell therapy is infusion-related. And one day, maybe we'll have a product that is actually home use, injectables. Then auto-injector, et cetera, from a sustainability perspective, that will be certainly a point to consider. The type of sustainability that we're talking about, besides the carbon emission, et cetera, from a plastic perspective, is really packaging material, and that's what we're working on. The whole industry is working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Tom Mo from Stanford Eco Center. And I got two questions. One quick question is, people used to ask questions, ask themselves first. But right now, all of them are the chatbots. So the first thing is about learning. I want to ask you how the AI enable and change your strategy making. And the second question is, what's your fear and wild imagination about the AI innovation in pharmaceutical industry? Maybe you can suggest maybe one or two things. Thank you.
If you don't mind, can you just repeat the question? I'm not sure I got both.
So the first question is about the learning. So people used to ask the question by friends, professor.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
But right now people ask chatbots. So based on your experience, how the AI shape enable you to do the strategy making?
Oh, to do strategy making specifically.
Yes.
So in other words, actually in your regular thinking, strategy, developing, execution, does AI change something the way you do it, or?
I don't know if it's AI, just in general. I think information, maybe data, is maybe one way of looking at it. Because in the strategy definition development, a lot of it it's about knowing what's the competitive landscape, right? So the availability of information, and to that extent, maybe AI does have, a role in terms of summarizing. If that's where you're going, yes. But at the end of the day, the strategy is, in terms sort of how we develop strategy, still has an element of human understanding how it works. Yeah. In terms of how we develop a drug, how do you actually make a drug, how you actually then kind of, commercialize a drug. That knowing how you do that is still an element that I need to play into my judgment because I have that knowledge.
Yes.
But you're going to get a lot more information, and a lot of the advantage is you can actually digest. I don't have to read all the things. I can get a summary, right? That's an efficiency gain in a way. Those are the kind of application that we use.
But is that something you're doing? For example, when you collect a material, when you digest a material to help you decide, make certain decisions, you rely on AI to help you. Are you doing that or not?
I'm not personally doing that.
But
luckily, I have people who are much more adept at these capabilities. There's some aspect of that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the second question is, what's your field wild imagination about the AI innovation in your industry in the next 10 years?
my fear is really, I think we have a little bit hyped expectation. That's my biggest fear, because I'm not as worried about actually using, because whatever we do in certainly my area, in a heavily regulated space, everything we put in has to double and triple confirmed and checked. So I know once I have the confidence in terms of the whole system, the way how we set it up, that I have confidence what is actually going to spit out. And then, of course, I would design the whole thing with the right intention. But I think this is going back to, it's going to take time. And then I think my main fear is the expectation everybody has, it's going to happen tomorrow. And that's not reality. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Before we give the mic to the next audience, I do want to be cautious of everyone's time.
Yeah.
Questions
So I think, do you think we can give audience another 10 minutes?
Sure.
10 minutes will be fine?
Yeah.
Okay. So roughly. Thank you for keeping, yeah.
I think we need to give Kay the mic.
Thank you for a very inspiring talk.
Sure.
I have one question with two aspects. The question is regarding success factors. The two aspects, one is regarding technology aspect. The other aspect, of course, is people aspect. So specifically, while a lot of things contribute to success from a technology perspective, what kind of challenges that, from your vantage point of view in AI specifically, would it be better collaboration that would, for example, is it a memory related, or is it algorithm related, or is it more computing related? My background is in computer science. I teach part-time in this school, and my research, of course, is in AI education. So I'm curious of the technology aspect, but also since I teach in this school part-time, I'm also curious about the people aspect. I teach creativity.
So I'm going to share a story, if you can bear with me, maybe to kind of provide some context how I think about this. So as a freshly graduate from PhD, this is years ago when I finished, my PhD thesis is on a new technology, is on the analytical chemistry side, chemical engineering side. When I first joined Genentech after my graduate school, this is a technology where actually just happened. It's the right time at the right place. We were developing and commercializing a product very well known, rituximab for lymphoma. As a way of testing that product, we end up having to use this new technology, and it's one of the first application. So it's from academia straight to industry. The first application, it was submitted to FDA. FDA approved it, went through the whole process. And then as a way to further promote this technology for industry-wide, we actually, me and others, actually by another nonprofit organization in the Bay Area scientific organization called California Aspiration Science Society back then, CAS, to organized international symposia, started in, frankly, 1999, to promote that technology so that you really build out that ecosystem for it to be a routine tool to use. And that ecosystem need to include academia, because not just because of innovation of technology, but also talent. That ecosystem need to include my industry peers. So if I'm the only one using it, it doesn't really last very long, because I'm not here to make the product, make the instrument, make the reagent, make the consumables. I need the industry, the instrumentation industry to do that, and they need business to get, sustain that. They need other clients, customers, and I need the regulators. So we not only brought in FDA, we brought in European agent, brought in Japanese, brought in Canadian, brought in health authority globally. And that took decades. That meeting is still ongoing. This year is the 26th of its conference. And that's not that, it's definitely now more established as a routine as an application. It's probably started as widely adopted more than a decade ago. But my point is to sustain that kind of scaled application continued. That's what it took. Maybe that's give you some context why I said decades. That's what it takes. It needs to build that whole ecosystem. Anytime you bring a technology, you need the people who can do it. You need whatever the supplier of that technology. And in our industry, you need the user, and one of the user is health authorities.
Yeah, typically they are kind of very cautious, very slow when you deal with the government, right?
Yeah, I don't want to put it that way. I mean, they're looking at it from a different lens. And they also are scientists. We need to learn how to use it. They also need to learn. So you have to bring everybody along the journey. They are scientists just like us.
Okay, thank you.
So hopefully that gives you some context. Yes, Kay.
Hi, Stacey. Thank you. And thank you, Professor Chen. I'm Kay, CEO of End-to-End GXP for You. We're a consulting firm. And the question's more focused for strategic entrepreneurs. During COVID, with multiple country closures that affected supply chains, the change really closed a lot of doors, is what happened. And the change in moving to make products within a local market, is what you mentioned, means moving manufacturing supplies, and you had mentioned earlier the people and whatnot. How does this shift affect developments in Asia Pac or global markets, where costs are lower, but supplies for manufacturing in that market may be limited? And what potential opportunities can you see for entrepreneurs to be strategic or to capitalize for that market with this change or shift?
Is this a question for Roger?
Well, both of you.
Maybe Roger, for once.
Innovation and strategy, right?
So basically,
How can entrepreneurs capitalize on that?
well, actually I was not anticipating, to answer questions, so I didn't pay a lot of attention to or deep thought to this question. But you're basically saying, now the localized become more and more important. Of course, there's the challenges, the cost challenges, but what are the opportunities for the local entrepreneurs, right? I don't know, actually, one thing I can see, probably small market will suffer because large markets, people can still leverage the size of the market, doing it locally, and it be efficient enough to compete, right? But if it's a small market, I don't know how to deal with that because the scale is small scale, maybe you can rely on robots to reduce the cost. This is just an immediate thought I have. And also, I think the other thing maybe, Stacey can talk about is about anything you do, you need to like a global standardized coordination. If every market is kind of isolated from each other, do you think that will hurt the standardization, the communication?
Maybe
which had some implications to that.
Maybe I didn't highlight that might be actually a benefit opportunity that we don't need to harmonize if you go local market, because one of the, and when we had the global supply chain, one of the key initiative is to harmonize standards across the globe so that you can have one single, product. Yeah. So if you go to market by market, then you don't need to harmonize. This is one maybe advantage. But going back to your question, Kay, I think I will at least look at when we say local for local, what does that mean? Is it single market or is it regional, et cetera? That still needs to be defined. Second is at least purely from a tariff perspective is manufacturing. So for drug development, there are a lot of other things beyond manufacturing. Yeah. So I think that's why it's still very dynamic, and we really need to understand what kind of the new expectation is before we can fully understand and sort of act accordingly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Dr. Adma,
Yeah.
for a very insightful talk. My name is Amrish. I'm a healthcare AI entrepreneur working mostly in women's health. So I had a question about AI-based analysis of imaging data, like X-rays or MRIs. Have you seen such AI-based analysis used as companion diagnostics for your biotech drugs? So for example, an AI-based analysis of X-rays, breast X-rays, for example, as companion diagnostics for your breast cancer treatment, predictive analytics, dosage determination, or
Yeah, when you say companion diagnostic, you're talking about a companion with a product or just actually diagnostic because just diagnostic tool, right?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay, I know I'm being maybe a little bit picky because we don't have a companion diagnostic test for, let's say, our breast cancer product. That's why I want to make sure. I'm not an expert in that space, to be honest. I've seen certainly application presentation of definitely imaging. There's a lot of application of AI capability or tools for imaging, and even how do you look at patient data, especially imaging data, into the regulatory submission. There's a lot of use case application that's being presented and shared by our peers in the space. There are definitely those applications, but comes down to then how do you connect that to the rest of the world, the work, right? Clinical trial, the rest of the data in the submission, and getting that approved. And that's why FDA also has a lot of new regulation, how they actually regulate, and FDA just one, EMA, et cetera, other health authority, how they regulate the submission, the regulatory submission itself with AI technology embedded. Because that's another thing. You have to also bring the regulators along, because they ultimately have to feel comfortable with what's in the submission to approve it. So it's not just so this goes back to my story, it's not just the biopharmaceutical industry people. There's actually everybody involved to getting a product approved, eventually getting the product to the patient, needs to be brought along the way.
Yeah, and maybe respecting Stacey's time, maybe we allow maybe one or two questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe we'll go for this one and that one. Yes.
And actually, Dr. Ma, as a Gilead's PDM veteran, so nice to see you.
Hi.
Now with therapeutics, RACMC. So I want to ask a question about accelerated manufacturing. My take from this week's FDA publication on basing on animal studies is that, of course, it's good for animals. From CMC perspective, that might require a shorter time from medchem to first in human. I would like to seek Dr. Ma's insight. What can we do from CMC perspective to further accelerate that manufacturing at that stage?
Sure. So pharma drug development, you're familiar with, right? There's three components need to kind of fit together. There's our space you call CMC. That's CMC stands for chemistry, manufacturing control. It literally is how you develop the manufacturing process, how you manufacture it, how you control the product quality. That's that element. That's one. And then the second area is, of course, preclinical or non-clinical, so animal study. And the third piece is clinical study itself. So for the overall drug development, if you think about from beginning till the end, one of us is going to be always on the critical path, and CMC tend not to be on the critical path beyond at the beginning, when everybody is waiting for material to put into the animal study. So in that context, there's going to be some impact to this accelerated development, but how much that impact, it depends on what stage of that animal study is no longer needed. At the very beginning, CMC is always on the critical path. That doesn't change if we don't do the animal study because CMC is already on the critical path. And then at the back end, human study is typically on the critical path. So whether you do animal study or not, that doesn't change anything. Because so you have to look at it from an integrated development perspective. Now, overall, of course, everybody's looking for ways to accelerate drug development because the cycle time, as I said, is 5 to 10 years. There's opportunity in the preclinical space. There's opportunity in the clinical space. Can you do trials that's smaller, less patient, et cetera, that you can accelerate? Same thing on the CMC side. There's development I mentioned earlier. Can you do more in silico model type of development instead of doing actual work? There's definitely use case examples. I think in the general sense, there just still a lot of work still needs to be done to get there on the CMC development side to accelerate timeline. Everybody's looking at ways to accelerate timeline. So.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe last question, right?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I advise very early stage startups and across different sectors like robotics and high data, very large scale data crunching, things like that. So not ChatGPT, OpenAI has enterprise products that they provide for scientists and all, which is about, I think, $250K or so for a year. And then they have other things where they can also have it for a local, within the group perspective. So which can bring in efficiency. So you go across development and manufacturing. Though you don't have an end-to-end AI solution, what prevents you from increasing the efficiency of a local group that they work together to bring efficiency? I'm kind of hard to figure out why you cannot make it more efficient.
Okay, let me just clarify. I think the earlier answer, there's three big components for any drug development the local solution helps, of course. And then what I'm saying is if all three components, they all have local solutions, but until all three solutions have kind of reached the same finishing line, you don't feel it because your submission is still not accelerated. That's the point. Does that?
Yeah, that answers, but you're bringing in efficiency. You can start working on more drugs also in parallel, right?
Of course, that's why that's why AI is here.
Okay.
It's not quite what people expect. That's the point.
Okay. Thank you. That was critical to me. I wasn't aware that now you can do more drugs in parallel, but the end result is the timing will be the same. That's not what we can do.
In terms of where we are today, you have gained efficiency. Again, it's pocketed. Yeah. That's the point. You can do more drugs in certain area, but you can't do a whole, end-to-end more drugs until you have sorted out. So there's a lot of pocketed application, but it's whatever is your bottleneck is going to be still the lowest denominator effect, right?
I think that's very insightful because we hear a lot about the ROI AI, but you're talking about why, people still do not see the big ROI because there's no, at least in your industry, there's no end-to-end, but there's a pocketed applications. Maybe, someday there's a breakthrough, right?
And then the challenge is scale. The AI, that's the point. You have to scale to everything we do for you to see the full value.
Yeah.
It's not the use, the application. That's the easy part. It's how do you scale across.
Like a total solution.
Correct.
Thank you. Actually, thank you very much for such a deep, insightful sharing, and as well as some kind of very deep, insightful, and also passionate questions from several entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Actually, I feel, just because I'm as an outsider, I feel I just sometimes just sitting in the classroom, don't fully understand what the professor was talking about. I got the same impression because a lot of technical terms.
I tried.
But that's a typical pharmaceutical talk, right? But anyway, I want to thank you very much for this very engaging dialogue and questions. And actually that we have to kind of stop here. And thank you again.
Thank you for watching.